Hello YouTube, this is Dustmite, or Mite of Dust if you want to be more formal, and today I'm going to be talking about illustration versus animation character design. And what's important to note about this is simply there is a difference between illustration, especially in character design, and animation. Some character designs are just not quite as friendly for movement, as you will soon see. So here I have drawn a image of something I like to call the traffic cone crab. Now, it's not perfect by any standards. I don't claim to be the greatest artist in the world, but this is a more highly detailed version of something I would draw as an illustration. So as you can see here, it has shading and complicated line work. It also has a shadow underneath it that is well defined. And I would just like to point out that this is evidently not very friendly for animating. In fact, I would consider it nigh impossible to animate. It has too many complicated parts. When you make something more detailed and more realistic, the more its movement has to be planned out and look realistic. It kind of goes hand in hand. So if you have a very detailed drawing, especially with this traffic cone crab, where each little piece of his leg is actually, his legs are basically are separated into two different parts, you actually have to be able to to tell how that will move when you animate it. You have to move each individual part. You have to notice how it's going to bend to make it look like it's actually moving. Now that adds some very obvious complications, as well as the fact that because this is not a 3D render or anything, you have to account for all of this mentally or with a drawn model. I will get into that later, but it becomes infinitely more complex. I like to compare it to a cubic graph. If you increase the detail of your drawing, the difficulty it takes to, or the effort it takes to animate it will cube. It is so much more difficult as you continue to up the detail. Now, aside from the line work and complexity of the drawing, there are just a couple other things I'd like to point out here that are mainly that make it unfriendly for animation, even if it were more simple. And this is where I'll move on to the second version of the traffic cone crab, which is evidently a lot less detailed and a lot less complex. I would consider it medium detailed. In fact, it kind of just looks like a little sketch you'd probably do in a sketchbook, much more than a character design, at least in terms of animating. So I would point out first of all that the shading is still here. In the corner, there's a little bit of hatching, but the gray tones in the middle parts of the traffic cone are laid in with the pencil. If you're scanning that in and trying to animate that, it is again very difficult to animate with shading. Usually, when shading is done in a cartoon, it is done in a effect called, or it's done with a process known as cell shading. It basically involves a base color and a second tone of that color that is darker. Usually it's done in a layer above the original character design, and black shadows are drawn on that and set to the opacity desired. I will get into that if you don't understand. I will get into that in a later video involving GIMP and animating much more in depth. But this is the character design phase. So basically, the coloring, the grayscale added by the pencil makes this more complicated to animate. But the line work is a lot easier to animate than the previous drawing. This is because it's more simple. The legs are now distinguished basically by their shape, rather than individual segments as in like an anatomical drawing. So it becomes a little bit more simple to animate it. The leg can bend, and it can be left up to the audience's imagination to imagine how exactly that would look or work. So this would be a medium to difficult character to animate, at least in its current state. If you removed the shading, it would be considerably easier because you can add that later, and it's easier to edit it in the computer than it is to continue to redraw it. Which brings me to my final and greatest example of what you could use as a character that you would draw on a frame, as you would scan it into the computer for animation. And this follows the traditional cell animation, where it is simply outlines at their blackest tone. I did add a shadow underneath, but ignoring that, the blackest tones are the only shading that is kept, and the rest of it is left white because the rest of the colors will be added in digitally. The lines are a lot more simple, and the legs obviously are even further exaggerated into just curved shapes that can be bent very easily, and it can still convey a slight 3D effect despite losing most of its detail, but it is much more simple to animate. Now, I would like to point out that obviously these traffic cone crabs have undergone a stylistic change as they lowered in detail. This is really up to you and what feel you're trying to go for with your animation. If you're trying to go for a more realistic look, try and shoot for that. But remember to, when you're drawing your frames, leave out the shading and very minute details that will not be needed, like texture and other things like that. It is okay, like you can see on the crab's claws on the low detail, to add little bumps to indicate texture, but going all out with like a full set of scales on something, rather than just a few dashes to hint that they're there, will make the animation process a lot more difficult, because each scale is then sort of an anchor, a visual anchor, if you will, that your audience will look at, and if they notice that even one scale all of a sudden disappears or is not moving correctly when you animate it, then they will notice it, they will pick up on that, and the experience will be tarnished, if you will. So that is about it for basic character design on a frame. I will be getting into more detail on how to use a very simple design and digitally color it, or transfer it to your computer in a more effective way than just scanning in pencil work. Mainly just pathing over the line work or redrawing it. But that basically covers what I wanted to go over. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.